So Guy Ritchie's new movie, The Gentleman, has just hit theaters, and it was not good.
I want you to play a game with me, Ray.
I don't want to play a game.
Oh, please.
No.
I said play a game with me, Raymond.
Right.
Lovely.
So even though most people won't believe me after this review and after my Aladdin review, I like Guy Ritchie. I think he's an interesting filmmaker, and he's somebody that I've constantly been interested in and will see pretty much anything he does, and even most of the movies that people don't like from him, I tend to like. I liked the King Arthur Legend of the Sword movie. I didn't love it. I thought it was fine. I liked The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Again, didn't love it. Thought it was fine. I loved Snatch. I liked Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. I think he's a likable director. I think he makes movies that are entertaining. Aladdin aside, most of what Guy Ritchie has done is things that I've been interested in or that I've enjoyed. But recently, his last two movies have created this trend of him making horrifically unlikable, unfunny, unwatchable movies. And even though The Gentleman isn't as bad as Aladdin, it gets close at points. There are points in this movie where I wanted to leave. It's borderline unwatchable at some points. And not only is it very hard to sit through, but it is insistently annoying. This whole movie, I was basically just irritated. And that mainly has to do with its constant edgy humor that is so obnoxious I can't even believe it.
I want you to imagine a character. Your boss, Mickey Pearson.
You're too smart to be blackmailing us, Fletcher.
But before we get too much into why I strongly dislike this movie, let's set the stage. This movie is Guy Ritchie's return to form after the Disney product that he pushed out that was Aladdin. It's sort of a one for you, one for me type of thing. And that's what it looked like going in. That's what I was figuring this movie was going to be. Because Guy Ritchie is constantly making movies about, you know, kind of wacky, eccentric characters doing wacky, eccentric themes. And he tends to lean in towards more gangster type movies or spy-esque movies. He likes that kind of intrigue. And that's what The Gentleman was built up as. And even as it is kind of that. It's got wacky, eccentric characters doing wacky, eccentric things. And it's a gangster movie. The whole movie revolves around one character, Matthew McConaughey, who is this weed lord of England. He controls a lot of the weed in England, and there is a swirling around him wanting to retire and people trying to get his business. And that's essentially the plot. That's the bare bones rundown, because that is very much not what this movie is, even though that is it. The premise, at least. This movie is complicated, very complicated to the point of being convoluted. There's a lot of characters, there's a lot that happens, there's a lot of intersecting stories, a lot of it's told non-linearly. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around unless you have actually seen it, because even though the movie is sort of about Matthew McConaughey's character, it's also not. It's about him, but it's not told from his perspective. It's told from the perspective of a private investigator telling Matthew McConaughey's associate, Charlie Hunnam, about a plot to usurp him. And that is where the non-linear structure comes into play, because most of the movie takes place after the significant events of the movie that are being recounted by Hugh Grant, this private investigator, who's telling it for some reason as if it's a movie, because the movie wants to be meta. So he has written a script about this and is recounting it as a story to this character, and that's how we get most of the information around this movie.
The plot begins to thicken. Now, I can't be specific about the heroes and zeros, but our protagonist is a hungry animal.
The problem with this movie, though, I think, for me at least, stems from me not being able to be invested in these characters. Guy Ritchie always has kind of, again, wacky characters with this sharp, snappy dialogue. They're sassy, they're in your face, they're aggressive. All his characters are kind of shades of that.
Nobody brings a fella the size of you unless they're trying to say something they're talking, right, Bye? Sorry, Mickey. Just give us our money back and you can keep your caravan.
They all are super snappy and super sassy, and that's how he likes to write his characters. That's how he likes to present his characters, and most times it is likable. Most times when I watch his movies, I see these characters as their own people, despite their kind of constant snappy sarcasm. But not here. This movie, every character feels like they're just being written exactly the same. I, at no point, could distinguish characters from each other in the sense of their dialogue. The characters have pretty bold characteristics. You know, Matthew McConaughey is a big drug lord who's always wearing these suits and is super in your face, and Charlie Hunnam is this restrained guy, and Hugh Grant is this farcical gay man, and so all the characters have sort of defining traits, but they are so horrifically unlikable, and the script paints them all very similarly. They all speak very similar, they all say very similar things. None of them feels like their own person despite having distinct traits, which is very weird. Every character here, except for Colin Farrell, is just so annoying anytime they're on screen. Colin Farrell, even though his character also has the problem of sounding like every other character, he brings his own flair to it in a way that almost no other actor in this movie does. The biggest problem this movie has is that Colin Farrell isn't on screen more, because he was so likable in the movie. He was so entertaining. He had moral dilemmas. He had a grounding. He felt like a real person that was just thrown into this situation of these gangsters clashing.
His name is Fahak. We're spelled with a PH, so it sounds like Fahak.
It is so irritating to have a movie just saying the same joke over and over again. Oh, this guy's a C word. Oh, F off. Oh, governor, you suck. Hey, you little C word. It's so annoying. It is so annoying. And since every character is basically the same person, the comedy fails even harder because nobody has an identity. So everyone sounds the same, and when they're saying the same jokes as everyone else, it is so much more painful. Again, the only person that sells their role is Colin Farrell, and that feels like it's because he's the only character with an occupation that isn't a gangster. He's taking care of these kids and training them how to be fighters, and he's bringing them off the streets. He's a good person with moral dilemmas. So when he's thrust into these situations, he has perspective that's fresh, that's actually interesting and fun. I liked him, but then it will cut back to a room full of English people saying English remarks and then saying F off or calling someone the C word.
And if you smell smoke, it's because there's a fire. So you're gonna have to stamp that out quickly.
But the ending of this movie may be the most unsatisfyingly satisfying ending I've seen in a hot minute, because not only was I happy it was over, but the pieces that this movie builds come together sort of nicely near the end. There's a lot that this movie sets up throughout its runtime that it pays off later, and I did like that. There's a kid that falls out the window, and then turns out that kid was the son of a Russian, drug lord, and he wants to get revenge on the people that did it. And so that pays off. And there's a lot of little things like that. There's a lot that this movie sets up that it pays off with later. And I was happy that the movie wasn't just a complete farce and had nothing to do or nothing to say whatsoever. It was nice to have things that were set up that were paid off later. It was great. Problem is, the ending starts to feel very like, oh, I got you. Nope, I got you at the end. There's so many different little backstabs or double crosses or false climaxes to the point of me just saying, be done.
All you did was
write an algorithm based on 2 heist movies I slept through and use it to automate a joyless process you call art? Yeah, I really did, didn't I?
And I think the ending being convoluted and hard to follow comes down to the structure of this movie just being bad. I don't like when movies have this way of presenting themselves as nonlinear when they don't need to be. I don't like it when a movie's saying, okay, look at all this series of events that you could show nonlinear, but let's chop it up and rearrange it all so that we can tell it non-linearly. I mean, I understand to a point why this movie did it to spruce things up because most of it is intensely boring, especially near the beginning, to the point where they shoehorn in an action scene that doesn't happen just to have an action scene. Hugh Grant makes up an action scene, and then Charlie Hunnam says, that didn't happen. He goes, oh, I know, but I'm just trying to spruce up the movie. But he's talking about his movie, but also the movie, and I said, stop, don't do that. Just don't do that. That's annoying.
These people are going to clean house, and you are part of that house.
And I also really dislike the fact that the movie took a little meta route. I know it's popular to be meta to realize that the characters are in a movie, but it's getting so tired at this point. I got very annoyed the first time a character mentions the fact that it's a movie, not directly hinting at the fact that they're in the movie, but that this character is making a script around the events of the movie. So he talks in like storytelling format. He's like, we're gonna set up the protagonist, and then it sets up Matthew McConaughey, and it's like, now we're gonna set up the antagonist, and it sets up this Asian guy, Dry Eye, and I'm like, I get it. Like, this is the movie he's presenting as his movie, but it's actually the movie. Let's not do that. I'm so done with movies being meta at this point. Unless you have some reason to be meta, just don't be meta. There's also this weird kind of racist undertones to the movie. Not only are every character just stereotypes, but there's a lot of moments where people say pretty racist things, and the movie plays it off as a joke, but there wasn't really a joke a lot of times. It was just the movie being subtly racist. And I'm not sure if the movie is being intentionally racist or they're being edgy for the sake of being edgy, because it doesn't work on its own, so it has to be one of those two things. It's not funny, so is it just intentional racism, or is it like just bad attempts at being edgy? Because it wasn't funny.
One of her associates had an accident.
So you killed someone?
No, it was the gravity that killed him.
Most of this movie, I would just say, why do it? Because everything, almost everything at least, just fails miserably, falls on its face, pitifully. The only things that work are a few little setup payoff things at the end, and Colin Farrell's story. I like him, I like his little school he has, I like his little band of characters, of people that he's helping off the streets. I like that. But that's like 20% of this movie, 30% maybe. The rest is just a complete farce. The rest of it fails spectacularly. No characters are likable. They all sound the same. The script is poorly written, poorly structured, and throws in terrible comedy that isn't funny, and then it's just meta for no reason. So this movie is everything that I dislike about movies. And it's all crammed into The Gentleman from a director I tend to like. But here, there is no style, there's no voice, there's nothing it has to say. 3 out of 10. But I will say, I chose the right movie to wear a turtleneck to, because pretty much everyone in the movie wears a turtleneck. So I felt right at home with these horrifically unlikable characters I didn't like. So now everyone can comment on how, haha, we don't like you either.